I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I had just stepped outside to water the rosemary when I heard Cecilia's voice float through the open kitchen window. She won't even notice. Lana. Half the time she forgets where she left her keys. Lana laughed, a sharp, careless sound I hadn't heard from her in years. Well, it's not like she's using the whole house. Once she moves out, we'll finally have space for Grant's home office. I stood there, hose in hand, letting the water spill over the herbs until the soil turned to mud. I didn't move until I heard the fridge door open and close, and their footsteps wandered off, fading into another room. That night, I went down to the garage under the excuse of looking for an old photo album. There, next to the dusty camping gear, sat 3 cardboard boxes sealed and labeled in neat black marker. Mom, office. Mom, winter. Guest room, Mom's closet. I hadn't packed those, and no one had asked me to. In my study, a drawer was half open. The red folder with my will and insurance policies was missing. I found it the next morning tucked beneath a stack of coloring books in the downstairs toy bin. I didn't say anything. I made breakfast. I smiled. I asked if the kids were excited about their field trip. Lana kissed my cheek and said, "You're a lifesaver, Mom." But that afternoon, as I folded the laundry, I kept thinking about the way Cecilia had said once she moves out. Not if, the way they spoke around me, not to me, the way the house suddenly felt like a temporary arrangement, like I was just waiting for permission to leave. I opened my bottom drawer, pulled out a file of my own, and quietly flipped to the notarized page I had signed 6 months ago. Everything was still where I left it. Nothing had changed. Except now, I knew they were planning something, and I already knew how I would respond. It started with a gut feeling, no sirens, no alarms, just a quiet nudge that wouldn't let me rest. I sat at the kitchen table, waiting for the water to boil, and opened my laptop. I hadn't logged into my retirement account in over a month. There hadn't been a reason to. The page loaded slower than usual, as if it, too, was hesitant to show me what I'd find. Available balance $1,298.42. I stared at the screen, blinking as though I could will the numbers to recalculate. This account had once held over $200,000. I clicked into the transaction history. 5 transfers, all within the last 6 weeks. All to the same external account, each withdrawal a little bolder than the last. I called the bank. Heart pounding, throat tight. The voice on the other end was polite, efficient, and devastating. Yes, Ms. Calloway. All transfers were digitally authorized from your registered device. We have timestamps and IP confirmation. My device, I whispered. Yes. Ma'am. I ended the call and sat still for a long time. Then I walked down the hallway and knocked on Lana's door. She was folding towels on the bed. "I need to ask you something," I said, voice as even as I could manage. "Did you touch my retirement account?" She didn't flinch. Didn't even look embarrassed. Just sighed. "Okay, don't freak out. It was just a temporary transfer. Cecilia needed help with medical bills. We didn't want to worry you." I could barely hear myself. "You used my savings, Mom. You're not even using it yet. It's not like we stole it. We're family. It's just resources shifting around. You'll get it back." I nodded. Once, slowly, then turned and walked out of the room, upstairs. I poured myself tea with a steady hand. If they believed that love excused this, if they saw my life's security as something flexible, something theirs to reallocate, then it was time they learned what love without boundaries really looked like. There was a time not that long ago when I believed sacrifice guaranteed safety, that if I gave enough, loved hard enough, supported generously enough, the people I poured into would never let me fall. When Lana had the twins, I moved in without hesitation. She was overwhelmed. Grant was working late, and Cecilia was, as always, just a little too busy to help. I put my life on pause and became the quiet pair of hands in the background, feeding, rocking, folding laundry through the night. I turned down a month-long trip to Greece with the Teachers Association that year. The first time I would have left the country. I never told Lana. It would have only made her feel guilty. Later, when her student loans became too much, I offered to cover the balance. She cried, hugged me, said she'd pay me back someday. She never did. I never asked. Cecilia never interfered, never complained, but she also never contributed. She visited occasionally with gifts and soft smiles, but never stayed long enough to notice the exhaustion in my face or the ache in my knees from carrying 2 babies up the stairs night after night when we were together. She was always gracious. "Evelyn, you're such a help. Evelyn, you make it look easy." But now I hear those words again, and they sound different, like placeholders, like compliments used to excuse absence. Lately, I've noticed her voice at family gatherings grows louder, more central. The twins run to her first now. She brings them gadgets and jokes and stories about Paris, and she never says no. Not like I do, with structure and limits and vegetables before dessert. She calls me dear like I'm the help, tells guests. Evelyn is so good with the little ones, while correcting me about where the juice glasses go in my own cupboard. I didn't notice the shift at first. These things never happen all at once. It's a slow migration of affection, of authority, of presence. But sitting alone in the garden after everyone had left, I realized I was no longer being thanked. I was being tolerated. I had been the scaffolding for their life, and now that the house stood tall, they were quietly dismantling the frame. But what they didn't know was I had never been part of their structure. I owned the land it stood on. The pasta was overcooked. The wine was cheap. Cecilia had brought it, announcing it was on sale. But still French. She poured it generously into everyone's glass except mine. I had water. Lana had made garlic bread, burned just enough to be familiar. She called the twins to the table while Grant scrolled on his phone. Conversation flowed loosely. School pickups, work stress, Cecilia's upcoming weekend in Tahoe. I was quiet. I'd learned that saying less made people more comfortable. Then, mid-laugh, Lana turned to me and said it. "Mom, you don't need all that money. You're not. Like, going backpacking across Europe." Everyone chuckled. Even Grant. I smiled softly. "What money are you referring to?" Lana waved her hand. "Your retirement? The house? I just mean it's not like you're doing anything wild. You live here. You help out. It's not like you have a big plan." I nodded and chewed slowly. I didn't speak for the rest of dinner. After the dishes were done and the kitchen was quiet, I went to my room and opened the locked drawer in my desk. Inside was a folder I hadn't touched in months. It held the revised documents, power of attorney, the new will, the property trust, the asset transfers. All notarized, all legal. 6 months ago, I had sat in a lawyer's office and asked the questions no mother wants to ask. What happens if my child takes everything and leaves me with nothing? What happens if the people I trust become the people I fear? The answers had not been comforting, but they had been clear. That night, I updated passwords. I encrypted files. I scheduled a meeting with my financial advisor under the name of the charitable trust I'd quietly opened in my late husband's memory. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I simply moved with the kind of clarity that comes from being dismissed by someone you raised. They thought I had no plan, that I was just passing time until the end of the story. What they didn't know was I had already written the ending. And I wasn't the one being erased. I was the one holding the pen. It's strange how quiet power can be. It doesn't come with thunder or declaration. It settles into the room the way dusk does, slow and certain, unnoticed until everything is changed. I started small, the oil painting in the front hallway. My grandmother's favorite was replaced with a print and quietly wrapped in linen, then tucked in the back of my closet. The carved wooden jewelry box, the one Lana always admired, disappeared from the dresser. I moved it to the safety deposit box downtown, along with the emerald ring from my engagement and the envelope of cash I'd slowly built over the years from tutoring and odd jobs. No one noticed, or if they did, they didn't ask. I took my name off the shared grocery account, canceled my debit card linked to the household expenses. Let Lana think it was a mix-up at the bank. I apologized for the inconvenience. She said not to worry, she and Grant would just cover things for now. That suited me just fine. The house, the one they assumed would naturally become theirs, was no longer under my name alone. It hadn't been for months. It now belonged to the Calloway Family Education Trust, a charitable entity with a defined mission to support the education of children from low-income families in my district. Upon my passing, it would fund scholarships, not vacations. The will was clear. No individual inheritance for Lana or Grant. Instead, a modest educational account had been established for each grandchild, contingent on their parents' lack of interference. I had written those clauses with a heavy heart. Not malice, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. They never asked what I planned for the future. They just assumed I didn't have one. Or worse, they believed they were entitled to shape it for me. The lawyer had raised his brow when I said I didn't want to tell them yet. Eventually they'll find out. Yes, I said, but not until it serves a purpose. And so I waited. I watched them live in a story where I was a placeholder. I watered the garden. I packed the lunches. I accepted the crumbs of affection that fell from their distracted hands. I stayed silent, not out of fear, but because silence has a way of stretching, of collecting weight, and when it finally breaks, it lands heavy. I was just waiting for them to step on it. Cecilia arrived just after 1, unannounced, but dressed with intention cream blazer, heels too high for errands, lipstick that didn't smudge. She was followed closely by a younger woman with glossy hair, a clipboard, and an eager smile. "This is Kendra," Cecilia said breezily as I opened the door. "She's just here to give us a quick sense of the market. Nothing formal." I stepped aside and gestured them in like I was the maid, not the owner. Lana came down the stairs moments later. Tucking her phone into her back pocket like this was all part of a plan that had already been discussed. Kendra walked from room to room making notes, snapping photos without asking. Cecilia trailed behind her, commenting on natural light and square footage. Lana nodded and added her thoughts about updates and renovation potential. No one asked me anything. When they reached the kitchen, I placed a tray of tea on the table. I poured it evenly and added sugar to Cecilia's cup without being asked. She didn't thank me, just stirred. Kendra looked around. This space has great bones. Honestly, it would sell in a weekend. Cecilia laughed. "Oh, we're not listing it. Not yet. But it doesn't hurt to know what we're working with." Lana leaned back in her chair. "Especially once Mom's ready to transition into something more manageable. Maybe the place near the park with the garden units. She's always liked those." I smiled and sipped my tea. No one noticed I didn't add sugar. I nodded along, offering polite responses, watching their faces as they crafted a future I hadn't been invited into. The calm I held wasn't performance, it was precision. I watched their eyes, their hands, The easy way they talked about removing me without ever saying the words, after Kendra left. Cecilia complimented the lemon bars I'd made. "You've always been such a comforting presence, Evelyn." That was the moment I realized they didn't see me at all. Not really. I was a role they needed filled until it was no longer convenient. I walked Cecilia to the door, thanked her for visiting, and waved until her car disappeared down the street. Then I went to the closet and pulled out the envelope I'd prepared 2 weeks ago. I checked the documents one more time and sealed it with a single piece of tape. It was almost time to set the table. And this time, I'd be serving something no one saw coming. The table was set with the good plates. Not for them, for me. I needed to remember who I was before their voices convinced me I was just lucky to have a seat. Sunday lunch had become routine. I cooked. They arrived late. The children ran wild while the adults talked over me. Cecilia brought wine again. Lana complimented the roast but didn't ask how I was. During dessert, I excused myself to the sideboard. I took the envelope from the drawer and laid it gently beside Lana's plate. She looked at it, then at me. "What's this? Something I thought you should read in private. But if you'd rather do it now, that's fine too." She opened it. Silence followed. Cecilia looked over Lana's shoulder, brow furrowing as she read. Her fork stopped midair. Inside were 3 things: a notarized copy of the revised will, documentation showing the house had been transferred to the Callaway Family Education Trust, a legal notice informing them they had no claim to the property. Past or future, I watched Lana's hands tremble as she reached the last page. "What is this?" she asked. Voice thin. "It's clarity," I said. "In case there was any confusion about what belongs to whom." "You rewrote the will?" she asked. Stunned. "You locked us out of everything. I ensured that what I worked for would go where it was always meant to go, but we're your family," Cecilia cut in. "And that never changed," I said. "But family doesn't mean ownership." Lana stood up, her chair scraping hard against the tile. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked like someone who'd been walking confidently toward a door she assumed would open, only to find it sealed shut. The rest of dessert was quiet. The twins asked for more whipped cream. I gave it to them. I even smiled. When they left, no one said thank you. I stood at the window, watching their car pull away, and I felt no guilt. Not even a trace. Because what they never understood was, I was never asking for their permission. I had simply waited for the moment when silence could speak louder than any plea. The phone didn't ring the next day, or the next. Lana didn't call. There were no angry voicemails, no half-hearted apologies, no questions, only silence. Cecilia vanished just as quietly. No drop-ins, no wine, no more friendly reminders about what would be easier for me in the long run. I called the locksmith that Wednesday. He arrived with his tool bag and a polite smile. I offered him lemonade while he worked. When he asked how many spare keys I wanted, I said, 1. Just 1. The lawyer called later that afternoon to confirm everything was finalized. The trust was protected. The documents filed. My assets were secure legally, irrevocably. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. I stood on the back porch and looked at the garden I had once tended daily, then slowly neglected while I tended to everyone else's needs. It was overgrown, but alive. I stepped into the soil with bare feet. No hesitation. I pulled weeds, trimmed back vines, and uncovered what had survived beneath months of forgetting. The rosemary bush had doubled in size. The lavender had stretched into the walkway, untamed but fragrant. I worked until the sun began to dip behind the fence, until my fingers smelled like thyme and my arms ached from pruning. I didn't stop because I was finished. I stopped because I could. There was no dinner to make for anyone else. No mouths waiting at the table. That evening, I ate a simple bowl of soup with the windows open. The breeze moved through the curtains like a whisper. No one said sorry, but the quiet no longer felt like punishment. It felt like a clearing, a breath. And as I washed my bowl and set it gently in the rack, I thought about what came next, not what I had lost, but what I was finally choosing. It arrived on a Thursday, tucked between a grocery flyer and a reminder for a dental cleaning I no longer needed. A small envelope, pink along the edges, addressed in neat, blocky handwriting. Inside was a folded note card with a butterfly on the front and a short message inside. I don't know what happened, but I know you always made my lunch. I remember that. Love. Naomi. I sat at the kitchen table holding that card for a long time. No punctuation, no explanation. Just memory simple, clear, and hers. I pictured her at 8 years old, swinging her legs at the counter while I cut the crust off her sandwich just the way she liked. I remembered the quiet thank you she always whispered before running out the door. That small act, repeated 100 times, had stayed with her. Out of everything she could have forgotten, she held on to that. I pulled out a sheet of paper and wrote back. Hand steady. Naomi, I don't expect you to understand everything right now, but you should always know this. You had a place at my table, and you always will. That will never change. Love, Grandma. I sealed it, stamped it, and placed it in the mailbox before I had time to second guess it. Whatever Lana had told her or hadn't, Naomi had reached across the silence on her own. Not to take sides, not to fix anything, just to remember. And that memory was enough to open a door I thought had been shut for good. Lana came by on a Tuesday. No warning, no children, no Cecilia. She stood on the porch like someone rehearsing an apology they didn't know how to begin. I opened the door and waited. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside and motioned toward the kitchen. I didn't ask what she wanted. I already knew. We sat at the table where I had once packed school lunches and signed permission slips, where birthday candles had been blown out and vegetables pushed to the edge of plates. I poured her tea, set the sugar beside her. She didn't touch it. I know you were hurt, she began, and I know I should have handled things differently. She didn't say sorry, but the effort sat there between us like a fragile offering. I've been looking into the documents. The trust, the will. Her voice cracked slightly. Is any of it reversible? I stirred my own cup slowly, letting the clink of the spoon fill the pause. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm protecting myself. Lana looked down at her hands. Her nail polish was chipped. She looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before, not from parenting, but from unraveling. I just thought, she said softly, we'd always have time to fix things. I nodded. So did I. We sat there in the quiet. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. When she stood to leave, she touched my shoulder gently. Then she walked out the same door she once burst through with scraped knees and stories from school. I didn't follow. I didn't watch her drive away. I just stood in the kitchen, feeling the weight of all the things I'd finally stopped carrying.